Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week, comes from Make Believe Studios in Metric Halo. It is the MBSI. This is an emulation of a custom console built for Criteria Studios back in the early 70s and famously used on the Eagles Hotel California. As the legend goes, I believe that Saturday Night Fever by the Bee Gees, some of those songs were from that record were tracked on this console, as well as Fleetwood Mac Rumors. So there's a huge legacy. Those are three of some of the greatest selling records of all time. If you buy the plugin, does that mean you're going to get that many sales? I have no idea. I can't promise you that. But what I always look at when I'm looking at an emulation, particularly with something that I have no experience on, it's hard for me to gauge the authenticity of it if I haven't used the original gear. But what I do focus on is the feel and the vibe of it. As I go to turn knobs, what does it feel like? As I'm starting to turn it, does it sound musical? And so that was one of the first things that struck me. I thought this is, regardless of how accurate it is or not, I thought it actually sounded really good. So what I'm going to do first here is play a little bit of music through it so you can hear it A-B'd in and out. I have two versions of it here, and I'll explain that when we kind of go through all of the settings. But I'll do the one that has the compression and equalization on it all the way through. So I'll play through a little bit so you can hear what it sounds like, and then we'll focus on the settings and talk about all of the internal guts of it and break it down.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio, presenting the facts for one side of the case. And there's a seat here by the fire, as our ancestors used to do. Can't help thinking I would give anything to still be so confused by the moon.
Okay, so this is I'll explain it as the modern version, but just to get a sense of it, you can hear the openness. Obviously, I'm adding a lot of high frequencies, just the raw track. There's nothing else, no other processing above it or anything, just the raw tracks from the session and EQ and compression from this channel strip all the way through. And you can hear like how it adds depth and openness to the sound. And that's just me quickly kind of going through it. One of the things I want to gauge something on is how it feels, right? As I'm turning the knobs, what does it feel like? Does it feel like it's doing something? Do I feel like it's a creative tool, like it's musical? So we'll break it down a little bit here and kind of go through all of the settings. So essentially, when you start up here, there's a whole bunch of the normal type of stuff, A, B, all of that. They add one cool feature in here, though, which is a blend feature, which is cool because you can blend between two different settings on one channel and the other, which can also be good for, kind of morphing one into another thing. I'm not sure if this is the best plugin to do that with, but it is kind of a cool feature. It will work in one of two modes. It will work in the classic mode. Now, in the original console itself, it had a suppression circuit. So this was a dynamic, I guess something really like a gate is more or less what it is. Probably for the tape hiss and managing that, basic noise management, just to kind of deal with it on that end rather than compression, and then deal with all the compression stuff with outboard. And then in the modern mode, what they did was Make Believe Studios went through and they made a compressor that would fit through this fast, medium, slow attack time and a depth control, which is basically like a range control, kind of limits the amount of gain reduction. So maybe working in a similar way to the suppressed circuit, but as a compressor. So if we start with the kind of full channel strip, we can operate it there in the two classic modes. I'll go through the differences here. You could set the size, all of that sort of stuff. We'll get into this section here, which allows you to set the tolerances. What they found were a lot of inconsistencies between the different modules. There's also the channel strips from that are old. If you're thinking back to the early 70s, you're looking at a console that's already 50 years old. And so things age, don't work as well. But anyway, we'll kind of go through all of that. So there's a trim control here to start off with. Now, this is actually kind of cool because you get three basic settings: a line setting, a mic setting. So the level stays the same, but you get the difference in the sound, and you get a very distinctively different sound from the mic and the line amp coming in. Then there's an overdrive circuit. So when you flip to this, you can use the trim control as a way of controlling the amount of overdrive. If you are in the modern setting, what you have here is a compressor with a normal threshold, release time. Slow release is 120, and fast release is 50 milliseconds. Now, this depends on the setting here, right? Because this is the attack setting, right? So if we make it modern, it will be the same. That would be 50 up to 120, same thing. But if you make it slow, then it becomes 170 or 17. Yeah, up to 300. So the attack setting will affect the available release times as well. And then the depth control is like a range control where you could say basically no more than 2 dB of gain reduction or 3 dB of gain reduction or 20 dB of gain reduction. So you could decide that there. This engages the circuit. And when the compression is happening, you'll see this light up to display the compression. So you won't see a gain reduction meter in terms of decibel levels. Do it by ear. That's the way they used to do it. And it probably makes more sense for a console channel strip thing like this. If we go to the classic mode here, it's a suppressed circuit. Threshold now becomes for your gate, right? So you're kind of working a little bit in the opposite direction here. Again, release times here, 3 seconds, 1.25 seconds up to 3 seconds, which would make more sense for a gate. A little bit of a slower kind of thing. Again, a depth control to determine how much. You could see that lights up automatically because the gain is pulled down, right? So this is displaying that, and this will just turn it on or off here, okay? If we're in modern mode, we go to the EQ. There's a few changes as well. We start up at the top. It's basically a 3-band EQ. So the white one is a high-frequency shelf. It can be either 10K by default or 8K if you hit the switch in. You can make the mid-frequency boost and attenuation. This is only the case in modern mode. In classic mode, that goes away. So it was only a boost circuit. So you could, do your boost here. Now, in classic mode, these are all stepped timings. If you hold the shift key, you can go into 2 dB steps. Very similar to an API. So discrete settings and also discrete frequency settings as you sort of step through. One thing I will say is that be careful to look at what the frequency is here, because if you're looking at this, you think, oh, that's 1.25 kilohertz. But actually, when you look at the number here, clicking on it, says 607, right? So just be kind of aware of that. If you're just looking at the numbers, it's going to be different than what you think it is. You can make this a wide bell or a narrow bell, so it's default to wide. You can make it narrow here by doing this. That's sometimes handy with the cut circuit if you put that in. And there's a low frequency shelf, which could either be 100 hertz by default or 60 hertz by default, or by pressing the button here. So that's what those switches are for, and that you get your range of boost and attenuation there. Again, if you're in the classic mode, this will lock into stepped positions. If you're in the modern mode and you hold the shift key, you can keep on those step settings or go infinitely variable kind of in between, or to 0.01 dB or something like that. Okay, all right, so we got that there. This puts the EQ circuit in or out. There is also a high-pass, low-pass filter. Now, in the modern circuit, you can engage both, the high-pass and the low-pass, 40 hertz and 10K. Otherwise, in the classic circuit, you basically get one or the other, right? Either high-pass filter or low-pass filter. or in the middle, it's in the off setting. The fader is also a unique one. It's actually stepped in dBs, which is the rarest thing. Like you don't really see that in a fader path. You generally want it to be smooth. So I'm not sure how that actually transitioned or exactly how that worked, how you mix on something like that. I think later on, the MCI consoles generally used the API faders or the Penny and Giles faders. All right, so you have that whole basic setup. So that's basically the whole channel strip there, modern and classic, right? So it's just adding features there with the modern mode. Here, what you have the ability to do is to take any stereo channel and make it dual mono. And what you can do is you can't adjust the settings independent left and right. You can do a multi-mono if your DAW offers that and do them separately that way. But what you can do is by double clicking on the tolerance, you can make the tolerances kind of offset and then determine how offset the frequencies, the EQ gains, thresholds of the compressor, attack and release times vary from each other. And then there's sort of a rando button here, which will allow you to just sort of randomize it so you could make separations between the left and right, which would probably be a bit more akin to the original console. So, like, you know, I don't know. I guess Brainworks does their tolerance modeling technology, similar kind of idea, but you don't really have any control over it. Here you have actual more control over it on an independent thing, where exactly you want to use it. I did use a little bit of that in here, but we'll kind of go through it step by step. So here, with this, just kind of putting this together very quickly, we'll start here with the vocal. I'm really cranking in a lot of high frequencies. This is plus 10 dB up at 10K here. So that's quite a lot. Narrow bell curve just to kind of get, and at a weird frequency, which I don't normally boost. I wanted to see if I could get something that added a little bit of character to the voice, and it sounds something like this.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space.
Right? So a lot of presence, obviously some sibilance to deal with there. That is expected, but pretty smooth sounding. The EQ is actually, it's a passive circuit, has inductors in it, and very musical sounding overall. I just found as I was kind of dialing in settings and kind of tweaking around here, let me just kind of do like a quick thing here just to get a sense of that.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves.
So it's
now.
interesting that it says it goes up here to 9.87K, even though the labeling says 15K. Right?
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio presenting the facts for one side of the case.
Really allows you to kind of shape it with a pretty cool tone. Oh, this is also the narrow cue, just to kind of hear the difference there between the wider bell.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived.
See where I was.
They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio, presenting the facts for one side of the case.
Yeah, but very musical. There's a lot of flexibility there in terms of shaping the tone. I also, just kind of playing around here with the piano. I kind of went into some random settings here to kind of mess a little bit with the frequencies to just kind of get a little bit more spread on the sound of the piano.
I see the headlines.
And then you can also do it with the EQ gains here to kind of, just by double clicking on the knob and then adjusting it. This sets how much variation there would be between the channels, and then you adjust that accordingly here. So it's just like another kind of wrinkle you can sort of throw onto it to give it a little bit more, I don't know, realism or something. There's another thing here, one other thing that I didn't really play around with, but actually, just one quick thing here, just to listen, so you can hear what the differences are between. I set this to the mic setting. It's just to hear the difference between the mic and the line setting. No, that's the guitar. Right, and if you hear that on the vocal too, it gives you like another tone shaping option.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived.
Right, gives you kind of like a warmer, richer kind of sound. That's like a really cool, tone shaping option. Like if I wanted to saturate this, one quick way to do that would be to. Right, and so just for something like this, for room tracks on drums, I don't know, there's probably a million uses. Guitars, this is not going to be, probably appropriate for this track, but you get the idea with the saturation, how you can kind of work with that as a tool as well. Gives you a lot of great tone shaping options. Here with the bass, just quickly. very musical. Again, you can really kind of wherever you go, you're finding something that's usable. I don't know what other way to describe it, but I think if there's something that when that if you're mixing and you're kind of going through the process of mixing and you're picking a particular channel strip or something to work with, and it just feels like every adjustment that you're making is like a plausible, really good option, and then it's just a matter of deciding which one either feels right or what's the right vibe for the track. Do we want the tone to be like this or this for the bass? But just having that flexibility, even the limitations of just two frequency selections on your low shelf and high shelf, and a limited range on the mid range, still has a very musical vibe to it. And I think that's something that is again, not knowing ever. Now, I haven't worked on the original gear, so it's hard for me, or I have any experience with MCI consoles at all. But this sounds really cool. This sounds really cool. Great tone shaping capabilities. Very musical. Whether it will give you a hit record like Hotel California, probably not. But if you can shape the tone in some kind of cool ways, give yourself like a good basic structure to kind of shape things to do some things that are a bit unique for different sounds, might be worth checking out. Very reasonably priced as well. All right, I don't know. There you have it. Just kind of going through it quickly here. The Make Believe Studios MBSI, also part of Metric Halo. Really cool plugin, right? Emulation of a custom MCI console from the early 70s. Definitely worth checking out. Plugin of the week.